Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Pérez, I watched some of the hearing on television earlier. I apologize. I missed Senator Hawley's question because I was on the floor voting. I just want to return to some of the things he said. My crack staff gave me a summary, but I assume it must be incorrect. Was it your testimony that Brown v. Board was correctly decided?
Yes.
Was it your testimony that you cannot say whether Shelby County and Brnovich are correctly decided?
Senator, there's an important distinction that if you will give me a moment of your time, I'd be happy to explain, but that is accurate.
So was Roe v. Wade correctly decided?
Senator, it is the law of the land and I would apply it.
Was Lochner correctly decided?
Senator, it is not really the law of the land anymore, but if I had been confirmed during that period, I would have applied it.
Was Dred Scott correctly decided?
Senator, it is...
Surely you can say Dred Scott was incorrectly decided.
Senator, it was incorrectly decided.
So what's the distinguishing line of cases you will say is correctly decided and cases you won't say? Because it seems like you're willing to say that they're correctly decided if you like them, but if you don't like them, you can't comment on it.
Senator, I do appreciate the question, and I think it is important, and I want to clarify this. As a judicial nominee, I am bound by the Code of Ethics to ensure that any prospective litigant before me knows that they are getting an impartial and fair hearing where they will not be prejudged, where they will be given the opportunity to present their case. I think that it will not happen that a case of the permissibility of de jure segregation in schools would make its way before me. And as such, I am comfortable that I would not be violating my code of ethics by commenting on it. There are a handful of other cases that may be true. Loving is probably one of them, Marbury versus Madison. Everything else, I would be very, very reluctant to give a potential litigant the wrong impression that they will not get a fair day in court.
What about abortion? That's a live issue in the courts.
And I am not...
You're not going to say whether Roe v. Wade was correctly decided.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, you've certainly had a lot of harsh things to say in the past about cases like Shelby and Brnovich and some of the issues that were adjudicated there. In fact, we just got notice last night about this article that just was published that you wrote. The title of it is The GOP Campaign to Make Elections Less Free. You noted in the letter you sent with the article that you did not see or approve of the title before it was published.
That is correct,
Which
sir.
I can understand. Authors don't choose their own titles. I understand that. You didn't say whether you agree with it. Do you believe the GOP is campaigning to make elections less free?
Senator, the entire piece does not mention any political party, and that is because I am an advocate for the right to vote, and I would criticize any politician who would impede that right, irrespective of their political party.
Do you think requiring photo ID is an impediment to vote?
Senator, the Supreme Court in Crawford said that voter ID laws were not per se unconstitutional. However, a Fifth Circuit en banc said that a particular voter ID law was illegal. This is a case-by-case inquiry where we are fortunate enough to have precedent that I would apply faithfully and without reservation.
I know that I think Senator Durbin said this article sounded like a speech he would give on the Senate floor. I agree. I don't think it proves the point you may have been trying to prove, though, Senator Durbin. Ms. Pérez, you live in the New York City area?
I live in Jersey City.
Okay. How'd you get down here?
I took the Amtrak.
Okay. Did you have to show an ID to get your ticket or get on the Amtrak?
I don't believe so, sir.
Okay. Last time you flew, did you have to show an ID?
I did, sir.
Do you think that's an unfair restriction on your ability to travel?
That is the policy, and I am a rule follower, and I'm happy to abide by it because I can.
Okay. If someone commits a murder, do you think it's fair to call them a murderer?
If someone has been convicted for
convicted.
murder
Yes.
under, yes.
If they commit rape, do you think it's fair to call them a rapist?
Have they been convicted?
Yes, convicted.
Yes, yes.
So if they commit a felon, do you think it's fair to call them a felon?
I think that that is a bit different because there's a temporal issue, and I think that there's a raging policy debate on that.
Because in the past, you've said that you don't like to use that word. Like you said, I don't use words like felons to describe people. I mean, we don't describe people by a mistake that they made.
I don't I believe that every person is a child of God, capable of being redeemed, and I never look at anybody and see the worst thing that they've ever done.
If those convicted murderers or rapists get released from prison, often under misguided policies, do you think it's still fair to call them a murderer or a rapist?
Irrespective of what their label was, sir, I would be on record as an advocate of trying to advocate for their right to vote if the criminal justice system had deemed them to be fit to be living amongst us.
All right, thanks for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman. Congratulations to you all. Mr. Olsen, I remember when you used to come brief Congress as the director of the NCTC, and I always found you to be a sober, reasonable national security professional. Like I say, when Joe Biden nominated you to this position, I thought that was one of his better choices. But then I started looking at what you've been up to for the last 4 years, and now I have questions about which Matt Olsen we're getting. 2017, you wrote an op-ed entitled, "The Electoral College is a National Security Threat." I want to repeat that. The Electoral College is a national security threat. Do you still believe that the Electoral College is a national security threat?
Well, Senator, let me begin by thanking you for your initial comments about my time as the National Counterterrorism Center Director. And I spent my better part of my career as a government public servant protecting the country. I left the government in 2014 and entered as the private sector. I wanted to remain engaged on the issues that I thought were important. And as a private citizen, of course, I expressed some views, including that article you're referring to, in a way that I wouldn't and haven't expressed as a public or government servant. That view, yes, there are aspects in context, if I may explain, there are aspects of the way in which the Electoral College allowed or could allow nefarious cyber actors to pinpoint their efforts to influence an election. There are ways in which the Electoral College makes us more vulnerable to nefarious, particularly nation-state cyber actors to influence elections. And that was what I was seeking to highlight.
I'm sorry.
No, of course.
Our time is very limited here. So you still think the Electoral College is a national security threat?
I stand by the content of the article that I wrote. Yes.
Should the Department of Justice ever bring a lawsuit to try to force states to, say, adopt the National Popular Voter Compact?
Senator, I'm not familiar with any statutory provisions or proposals along those lines.
Last year, in the middle of riots that caused billions of dollars of damage and had murders spiking at rates not seen in a generation, you described the situation as mostly peaceful protests. Do you think the rioting we saw last year was mostly peaceful protests?
I think that I'm not sure exactly the comment you're referring to, but I.
You signed a public letter last June saying that.
Yeah, I will say this, Senator. If I'm confirmed and have the opportunity to lead the National Security Division, the threat that we face from the types of violence that we've seen from the past several years, particularly any type of domestic terrorism, I would be responsible for enforcing our laws and enforcing those laws regardless of ideology and enforcing them fairly and impartially. And that would be my pledge.
You once wrote that ISIS supports Donald Trump. You think that ISIS supported Donald Trump?
I appreciate, again, Senator, the article you're referring to. Again, as a private citizen, I tried to stay engaged on the national security issues that I had worked on. And I will answer your question directly. The article I wrote was based on statements that I had seen that I was very concerned about from a propaganda standpoint. In 2016, when I wrote that article, ISIS had risen and was using its propaganda machine to influence people in the United States, and they were using the language, the words of then candidate Donald Trump to advance their propaganda machine. And so I was referring to their exact words in making that statement. And I stand by the article. I was concerned about the ways in which ISIS was using those comments to recruit and mobilize people in the United States.
If it's true that ISIS supported Donald Trump, do you think Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi thinks he made a bad bet?
I'm very supportive of the nature in which we prosecuted and the way the Trump administration took the fight to ISIS over the past several years.
Okay. So, Mr. Olsen, I'll just say again, I had a lot of respect for the Matt Olsen we saw as the NCTC director, but I feel like something has changed here. Just in the last 4 years, to review what we've covered today, you've said ISIS supports Donald Trump. You referred to rioting last summer as mostly peaceful protests. You've said the Electoral College is a national security threat. It's one thing to leave government, comment on public affairs, to even be partisan, to give money to candidates of your choice and to campaign for them. But I feel like something about Donald Trump's presidency in the last 4 years sent you a little bit around the bend. So it makes me wonder which Matt Olsen we're going to be getting at the Department of Justice. My time's expired.
Thank you.